out of the ordinary insights. Brought to you by Investec Specialist Bank.
Welcome back to Captains of Industry. Joining me today is Erik Venter, the Chief Executive of Comair, and we're situated at their training facilities here in Kempton Park, just opposite the OR Tambo International Airport. Erik, just before the break, we touched on skills development, and here behind us we've got a simulator where I take it you offer your pilots training in actual and realistic trading, or not trading environments, but rather flying environments when they're in the sky.
It's remarkably realistic. In fact, sometimes we see pilots coming out of here actually perspiring because they get so involved in the realism in the cockpit. The images in terms of the screens are 100% realistic. You can see when the aircraft lands at the airport, you see the people walking across the tarmac, and you see the actual vehicles that we see at our airports driving on there with the actual logos of the companies that work at our South African airports, etc. So it is 100% realistic. When they took down the cooling towers at Cape Town for the power station there, we had to amend our imagery in the flight simulator to take the towers out of the images. So it's down to that level of detail. You can see the cars on the roads when you're flying into the airport. It's absolutely realistic. And so when people talk about having had a rough experience on crosswinds coming into East London or something like that, it's really nothing compared to what our pilots experience on the simulators. They get to experience every possible scenario. And we'd rather have them experience it on the simulator than discover it for the first time in the air, obviously. So they do know how to handle absolutely anything. And it's a great opportunity to have our simulators right here on the premises. Makes it very easy for them to get plenty of simulator time. We also do training for many other airlines around the world. We've got pilots from South America, from China, from India, lots from Africa, obviously, coming to do their 737 training at our facility as well.
Let's touch on your co-leadership of the company with Gideon Novick. That came to an end in December 2011 when he decided to explore more entrepreneurial ventures for himself. What was your working relationship like with him?
I think it was good. We had the same ultimate objectives, but the challenge is always that each person's got their own personality and way of getting to their objective. And so while it's quite easy to agree on where you want to get to, it's more, the conflict comes in with how to get there, and the fact that it's almost like having two parents and the child deciding to play off one against the other. So sometimes you have a situation where people will decide who they're going to want to go and ask for permission to do something because they know the attitude of one might be different to the other, etc. And that creates a bit of difficulty in trying to align the organization. So I must admit it is easier to have one person trying to align the whole organization's approach to things. But it wasn't a case of conflict, it was more just a case of having the same objectives but different methodologies to get there.
And the increased responsibilities on your shoulders?
Look, it takes a couple of weeks to get used to taking on different areas of the business, but once you're into it, none of it was stuff that I'd never dealt with before, so it wasn't such a big deal.
Let's take a look at your background. You're a qualified chartered accountant. Not many people can say that they've accomplished that feat, but I'm sure you have very strong views with regard to education and the abilities that it's given you in your position currently.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's probably the biggest crisis facing our country, and it's why we are now lagging behind where we should be compared to the rest of Africa. It really comes down to education. And if there's a single lost opportunity that we've had as South Africans, it's the education system. So, at the moment we're seeing the quality of education in places like Malawi, Zimbabwe, etc. is actually exceeding South African quality, and we're seeing other African countries starting to catch up and overtake South Africa in terms of their growth potential, in terms of their economic freedom indexes and those kind of things. So I really think we need to do some serious catching up there. We don't want to start having to import skills into the country that's got so many people unemployed. I think the ability in Comair to do so much training, and the fact that we are in an industry that doesn't have a tertiary training institution to provide us with skills, in that regard I think we're contributing quite substantially to building skills in South Africa. And while a lot of the skills are airline specific, there's still a lot of generic skills that people learn about service industry and about how to deal with passengers and how to deal with people and how to deal with systems and all those kind of things, which means that our staff are not locked into aviation at the end of the day. If they want to move into hotel industries, or if they want to move into restaurants or whatever else that they want to get involved in, they can enter those businesses at a reasonably high level. They're not coming in as basic waiters anymore. They can come in as hotel managers and as restaurant managers and those kind of jobs. So hopefully we're contributing to the broader service industry skill base through the training that we do in Comair. But it's never enough. There's only so much that you can do as a company. The big challenge we have is the entry level. So at the moment we've got a program, we're setting up a bridging institution on the East Rand for matriculants who actually need a bit further training before they enter the workplace. Because we found that taking matriculants into our training programs, we already have a big gap there that hasn't been filled in terms of their abilities. So we're setting up this training institution where we'll get matriculants from the East Rand to go through the institution. It's about a 6-month course where they develop their writing skills, their conflict resolution skills, their computer skills, all those kind of things. So that once they come into our training program, they're ready to get up and running and integrate much more quickly.
Erik, when you were younger, did you ever dream that you, or think of the fact that you'd become a CEO one day?
No, it never really crossed my mind. In fact, probably the biggest influence I've had was when I went to a guidance counselor, a career guidance counselor at UCT, and they told me you can do anything except become an accountant. So I said, okay, well, I'm going to become an accountant then. So a bit rebellious, I suppose. And no, it worked out well. But I'd never imagined I'd get into aviation. I always had my mind more set on engineering and those kind of things. But it just kind of worked out this way, and it's great. I wouldn't change anything.
What would you contribute, or rather attribute your career rise to? What were some of the key highlights in your career that maybe led you to the position that you're in at the moment?
I think the fact that I always liked the challenge. So and even in terms of the course that I took in terms of doing a BCom, it was just to challenge the fact that they told me I shouldn't be doing a BCom. Anything that comes up as a challenge I love to tackle, and I think particularly in this industry you're never going to get a quiet year, you're never going to get a chance to sit back and relax. So that maybe suits my interest in these challenges quite well, so I think that helped. And then, having a fantastic team of people to work with. It's much easier to get things done that you want to get done when you've got really good people in the bigger team in the company. If you're sitting out there and you've got a really difficult organization to work with, I think it probably wears you down after a while, and you don't get as far as what you'd like to get, and you probably lose a bit of momentum. Whereas here, the momentum's just been kept up over the years, and things have been done and changed. I think the fact that the industry changes so fast builds a culture of tolerance for change. So we have had lots of big changes over the years, particularly the last 2 years when we hit this big fuel price crisis. We had to make massive changes in the organization around systems and people and job descriptions and processes and all the rest of it. But the company's got that environment that they expect things to change all the time. And that's helped a lot. It makes it quite inspiring to move things along, because you know that the business is ready to move.
What legacy would you like to leave behind at Comair?
I think I'd like to be sure that it's a really sustainable long-term business in South Africa, that there will always be competition in the South African airspace. And that's the one thing that we're always fighting for, is to keep competition in South Africa. If you go back to pre-92, when there wasn't an open airspace in South Africa, when the private sector couldn't get involved in the main routes, ticket pricing was high, it was expensive to fly. And I really would like to make sure that not only in South Africa, but further into Africa, we get good competitive ticket pricing, so that Africa can be globally competitive as a business place to do business, and that it'll stay that way, and that there isn't a risk that the private sector gets pushed out and it all becomes monopoly airlines again.
How do you manage the work-life balance? You're a family man, but have a huge amount of responsibilities to take care of here at Comair. How do you juggle the two?
I think you just got to build up a good team around you, so you don't have to do everything yourself. And particularly in the airline, it's a 24/7 business. When the aircraft are not flying, they're being maintained, they're to a tight schedule, they've got to come out first thing in the morning to be ready for that first flight. So the business never stops. And you've actually got to have a good team that's there to fill those shifts around the clock. Otherwise, I'd be awake 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But I've got a great operations team, great technical team, great ground staff team, and they know what to do. They carry on with the business. If I wasn't here for a few weeks, life would continue.
Erik, just before we close off with, if you could go into any of the aircrafts that are taking off at the OR Tambo International Airport right now and speak to any of the passengers that are there, what would you say to them?
I think probably one of the biggest issues at the moment is the long-term issue of ticket pricing versus the short term. And the real issue there is that, yes, we've seen massive cost increase over the last 2 years, and ticket prices have gone up in the last 2 years by about 20%. But at the end of the day, the real issue is, where would this industry be if we didn't have competition? And so that is really a bigger issue. The long-term issue is the real issue. In the short term, yes, we try and keep ticket prices down, but we've got to cover our costs. In the long term, we really need that support from the travelling public, because a monopoly situation would not be good for this country.
Erik Venter, Chief Executive of Comair, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
And that's where we leave it for today on Captains of Industry. Erik Venter is the Chief Executive of Comair, which is the company that controls the 2 airlines in the country. That's Kalula Airlines as well as British Airways. Join us again next time where we profile another Captain of Industry.